Sir, last warning. Step off the shuttle now.
I'm a paying passenger with a valid ticket. You don't have probable cause.
Don't lecture me. Stand up or I'll make you.
Then do it on camera. Because this is about to cost the city millions.
Officer Derek Vance had been wearing the badge of the Liberty Airport Police Department for 5 years when he made a decision that would implode his career and cost the taxpayers of the city a staggering $6.4 million. He was 28 years old, physically imposing, and possessed a dangerous combination of limited experience and unlimited confidence. On a bright, sun-drenched Tuesday morning at the busiest terminal shuttle stop, he received a dispatch regarding a suspicious individual refusing to exit a transport vehicle. The individual in question was Dr. Marcus Thorne, a 54-year-old former chief of police and a current high-level consultant for the Department of Justice. He was the man who literally wrote the manual on de-escalation tactics that Vance was supposed to have memorized. What Vance did next, ignoring the man's credentials, escalating a non-event into a physical altercation, and arresting one of the most respected law enforcement experts in the country, would become a definitive case study in how implicit bias blinds officers to reality. Before we dive into this story, I want to know where you are tuning in from. If you believe in holding power accountable, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Your support allows us to keep digging for the truth. The Green Line shuttle loop at Liberty International is a chaotic ecosystem of exhaust fumes, slamming doors, and stressed travelers. It was 10:15 a.m. on a Tuesday in May. The sky was a piercing blue, the sun reflecting off the asphalt and the glass facades of the terminals. The air smelled of jet fuel and coffee. It was the kind of morning where everyone is rushing to be somewhere else. Dr. Marcus Thorne was the exception. He was sitting in the back row of Shuttle 402, a calm island in a sea of frantic movement. Thorne had spent 32 years in law enforcement, rising from a beat cop in Detroit to the chief of police in Atlanta before retiring to work as a specialized auditor for the DOJ. He spent his days investigating police departments accused of corruption and civil rights violations. At 54, Thorne carried himself with an effortless authority that didn't need to shout. He was wearing a bespoke navy blue suit, a crisp white shirt, and no tie. His luggage, a single expensive leather weekender bag, sat on the seat next to him. He was in town for a very specific reason. He had been hired by the city to conduct a mandatory 3-day seminar on constitutional policing and bias reduction for the very department that patrolled this airport. In his hands, he held a tablet reviewing the training slides he would be presenting that afternoon. He was reviewing the section on procedural justice, the idea that how people are treated during an interaction matters more than the outcome. He was completely absorbed in his work, sipping a bottle of water, waiting for the shuttle to complete its loop and head toward the rental car center. He had a valid ticket on his phone. He was bothering absolutely no one, but to the driver of Shuttle 402. Marcus Thorne's presence was an irritation that was rapidly evolving into a threat. This driver, a man who viewed the shuttle as his personal domain, had been watching Thorne in the rearview mirror for 15 minutes. The shuttle was idling near Terminal B, waiting for a shift change, and Thorne had simply remained in his seat while other passengers filtered in and out. Most people were visibly anxious, checking watches, clutching boarding passes. Thorne was too still, too composed. In the driver's mind, a black man, sitting that comfortably with no apparent urgency, didn't fit the narrative of a legitimate traveler. He didn't look like the business travelers the driver was used to, or rather the driver's bias wouldn't allow him to see Thorne as one. The driver, Brett Collins, was 35 years old and had been working the airport loop for 6 months. He was a man who craved authority but had achieved very little of it in his life. He took great pride in running a tight ship, which mostly meant barking orders at tourists about where to put their luggage. When he looked in the mirror, he didn't see a DOJ consultant preparing for a lecture. He saw a man loitering. He saw someone who might be casing the bus for left-behind valuables. He saw a problem. Brett turned in his seat, his voice heavy with annoyance. "Hey, buddy. End of the line for this loop. You gotta get off." Thorne looked up, sliding his reading glasses down his nose. "Excuse me, the schedule says this shuttle proceeds to the rental car center at 10:30. I'm waiting for the departure." "I'm taking a break," Brett snapped, improvising a policy that didn't exist because he wanted this man out of his vehicle. "You can't just sit there. You need to wait on the curb." Thorne checked his watch. "It's 10:20. It doesn't make sense for me to stand in the heat with my bag when the bus leaves in 10 minutes. I have a ticket. I'm fine right here." Brett's face flushed. He wasn't used to being challenged, certainly not by someone he had already categorized as a vagrant or a troublemaker. "Look, pal, I don't know what your game is, but you're making me nervous back there. You get off or I call security." Thorne sighed a sound born of 3 decades of dealing with petty tyrants. "I am a paying customer," Thorne said calmly. "I am sitting quietly. Call whoever you need to call, but I'm not standing on the curb for no reason." Brett grabbed his radio. He didn't call security, he called the police dispatch directly. "Dispatch, this is Shuttle 402. I've got a male subject refusing to exit the vehicle." "Ah, he's loitering, acting suspicious. I think he might be intoxicated or casing the bus. I need an officer at Terminal B lower level." Officer Derek Vance heard the call and felt a surge of adrenaline. Refusing to exit and suspicious were trigger words for him. He had been patrolling the terminal loop for 4 hours, writing parking tickets and shooing away rideshare drivers, and he was bored. Vance was the kind of officer who believed that policing was about domination. He had a reputation in the break room for being proactive, which was a polite code word his supervisors used for aggressive. In his 5 years on the force, he had accumulated 7 citizen complaints. Most were for rudeness or unprofessional conduct. 2 were for excessive force. All of them had been dismissed or resulted in minor counseling because Vance was good at writing reports that justified his actions. He knew the buzzwords furtive movements, aggressive stance, fear for safety. He pulled his patrol SUV up to the bumper of the shuttle, flipping on his light bar to add a sense of drama to the sunny morning. He stepped out, adjusting his utility belt, his hand resting habitually near his holster. He saw Brett, the driver, standing by the open shuttle doors, arms crossed, looking vindicated. "He's in the back," Brett said, pointing a finger like an accuser in a witch trial. "Won't listen to a word I say. I think he's up to something." Vance nodded, already deciding the outcome of this interaction. The suspect was non-compliant, therefore the suspect was guilty. He marched onto the bus, his boots heavy on the metal steps. The air conditioning inside was humming. The bus was empty except for the man in the back row. Vance saw Marcus Thorne. He saw the suit, but he didn't register professional. He saw the expensive bag, but he didn't register traveler. He saw a black man sitting with his legs crossed, reading a tablet, looking at him with an expression of mild annoyance rather than fear. To Vance, the lack of fear was the biggest red flag of all. In his experience, innocent people were nervous. Guilty people were arrogant. "All right, let's go." Vance barked, his voice filling the shuttle. "Grab your stuff. You're off the bus." Thorne didn't jump. He didn't scramble. He placed his tablet face down on his lap and looked Vance in the eye. "Good morning, officer. Is there a problem?" "The problem is you're trespassing," Vance said, closing the distance between them. He walked down the aisle, towering over the seated man. "Driver says you need to leave. That means you leave, now." Thorne remained seated. "Officer, I have a valid transfer ticket to the rental car center. The driver is taking a break, which is fine, but I have the right to remain on board as a paying passenger. I am not trespassing on a public transit vehicle during operating hours." Vance hated lawyers, and this guy sounded like a lawyer. "I'm not here to debate policy with you. I'm giving you a lawful order. Step off the bus or I will remove you." "A lawful order must have a legal basis," Thorne said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming the voice of the chief he used to be. "There is no disturbance here. I am not intoxicated. I am not threatening anyone. I am a traveler waiting for my connection. You are being used by a driver who is acting on bias, and you are falling for it." Vance's face turned a dangerous shade of red. "You want to talk about bias? How about I arrest you for obstruction? Stand up." Thorne knew exactly where this was going. He had reviewed hundreds of body camera videos just like this. He knew that if he stood up quickly, Vance would claim he lunged. If he stayed seated, Vance would claim passive resistance. "I am going to reach into my jacket pocket," Thorne narrated slowly, his hands clearly visible. "I am going to remove my identification. I suggest you look at it before you continue down this path." "Don't reach for anything," Vance yelled, his hand dropping to his taser. "Hands where I can see them." Thorne froze. He slowly turned his palms up. "My hands are visible, officer. I am trying to help you avoid a lawsuit. I am a federal contractor. I am a retired chief of police. My credentials are in my left breast pocket." Vance sneered. He didn't believe a word of it. A retired chief riding the shuttle. In this neighborhood. "Yeah, and I'm the police commissioner. Stand up, turn around, and put your hands behind your back." Thorne looked at the officer's nameplate. D. Vance. He committed it to memory. "Officer Vance, you are making a critical error. I am asking you to call your watch commander before you touch me." "I don't need a supervisor to take out the trash," Vance said. He reached down, grabbing Thorne by the lapel of his $2,000 suit. "You're under arrest." Vance hauled Thorne up from the seat. Thorne didn't fight back physically. He knew that would be a death sentence, but he didn't make it easy. He made his body heavy, a tactic known as dead weight, forcing Vance to exert effort. "Stop resisting," Vance shouted the standard line for the cameras. "I am not resisting," Thorne said loudly, his voice projecting toward the front of the bus, where a few curious tourists had gathered on the sidewalk. "I am complying with an unlawful arrest. I am Dr. Marcus Thorne. I am a consultant for the Department of Justice." Vance spun Thorne around, twisting his arm behind his back with unnecessary force. A sharp pain shot through Thorne's shoulder, an old injury from his days on the beat in Detroit. He gritted his teeth but refused to cry out. "You talk too much," Vance muttered, shoving him toward the exit. "Let's see how much you talk in a holding cell." They moved down the aisle. Thorne's expensive leather bag was left behind on the seat. "My property," Thorne said. "Secure my property." "It'll be there when you get back. If you get back," Vance said. As they stepped off the shuttle and onto the curb, the bright sunlight hit them. The scene had attracted an audience. Travelers with luggage carts, families waiting for taxis, and the shuttle driver, Brett, were all watching. Brett looked smug, arms crossed, nodding as if justice was being served. But the other witnesses looked disturbed. They saw a well-dressed older man being manhandled by a young, aggressive cop. Phones were already out. The red recording lights were blinking. Thorne saw the cameras and knew exactly what to do. He stopped walking, forcing Vance to shove him again. He looked directly at the nearest iPhone held by a teenage girl in a college sweatshirt. "My name is Dr. Marcus Thorne," he announced, his voice booming with the cadence of a man used to addressing press conferences. "I am a retired chief of police and a federal auditor. This officer is arresting me for sitting on a shuttle bus with a valid ticket. He has refused to verify my credentials. He has refused to call a supervisor. This is a violation of the Fourth Amendment and Department Policy Section 402.1 regarding interaction with the public." Vance yanked Thorne's arm upward, trying to silence him. "Shut up. Get in the car." The crowd began to murmur. "He didn't do anything," a woman shouted from the back. "He was just sitting there," another man added. "Hey, officer, check his ID." Vance ignored them all. He was in the tunnel vision of the arrest now. He pushed Thorne against the hood of the patrol SUV. The metal was hot from the sun. Vance kicked Thorne's legs apart. "Spread 'em." He pulled his handcuffs from his belt. "You like citing policy, cite this." He ratcheted the cuffs onto Thorne's wrists. He did it tight, too tight. It was a petty, punitive move. The metal bit into the bone. Thorne winced. "Officer, these restraints are non-compliant. You are checking for spacing. You are required to ensure 2 fingers of space." Vance laughed humorlessly. "They feel fine to me." He patted Thorne down, reaching into the jacket pocket and pulling out a slim leather wallet. He flipped it open. Inside was a gold badge. Not a plastic novelty toy, but a heavy weathered gold shield that said Chief of Police, Retired. Next to it was a laminated federal ID card with the seal of the Department of Justice. Vance paused for a fraction of a second. His brain tried to process the visual information, but his bias hit the override button. It has to be fake. People buy these online. He snapped the wallet shut and shoved it into his own pocket. "Nice props. We'll add possession of forged government documents to the charge." Thorne shook his head slightly. "You just sealed your fate, son. That is a federal document. You are now tampering with evidence." Vance opened the back door of the cruiser and pushed Thorne inside. The plastic seat was hard and uncomfortable. There was no legroom. Vance didn't buckle him in another policy violation. He slammed the door, muttering about sovereign citizens and scammers. Thorne sat in the back of the cage, the heat rising in the car. He closed his eyes for a moment, controlling his breathing. He was furious. A cold, sharp rage, but he channeled it. He began to mentally draft the lawsuit. He cataloged every second. The initial approach, the lack of probable cause, the refusal to inspect ID, the excessive force, the tight cuffs, the failure to seatbelt. Do you think police officers should be personally liable for civil rights violations? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. The drive to the precinct was short, maybe 10 minutes, but the silence in the car was heavy. Vance drove with one hand tapping on his computer, with the other entering the arrest codes. Disorderly conduct, trespassing, resisting arrest. He felt good. He felt like he had cleaned up the streets. He had no idea that the criminal in his back seat was currently memorizing the route to add to the complaint about erratic driving. When they pulled into the sally port of the airport precinct, the automatic doors rattled shut behind them, blocking out the sun. The environment changed from the bright open terminal to the sterile echoing concrete of the jail intake. Vance hauled Thorne out of the car. "Let's go. Bookings is this way." He marched Thorne through the heavy steel doors and into the processing area. The station was busy. Officers were typing reports, phones were ringing. At the high desk sat Sergeant Miller. Miller was 58 years old, a dinosaur in the department with white hair and a face that had seen everything. He was 2 months away from retirement. He looked up over his reading glasses as Vance approached with his prisoner. Vance was beaming. "Got a live one, Sarge. Refused to leave the shuttle. Caused a scene. Claims he's the police commissioner or something, carrying a bunch of fake badges." Miller looked at Vance, then he looked at the prisoner. He squinted. The man in the cuffs was standing tall, chin up, staring right at Miller with a look of intense, disappointed recognition. Miller's heart skipped a beat. He knew that face. He had seen that face on the cover of Police Chief magazine for a decade. He had seen that face on the flyers that were currently taped to the break room wall announcing this afternoon's mandatory training. Miller stood up slowly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Vance," Miller said, his voice trembling slightly. "Vance, what exactly did you do?" "I told you, Sarge. Trespassing. Resisting. He's got these fake IDs." Vance pulled Thorne's wallet out of his pocket and tossed it onto the counter. It landed with a heavy thud. Miller didn't pick it up. He didn't need to. He looked at Thorne. "Chief Thorne?" Miller asked, the title slipping out automatically. Thorne nodded once. "Sergeant, I believe we have a scheduled seminar at 1400 hours. I appear to be early, and significantly less comfortable than I expected." The color drained from Vance's face. It didn't happen all at once. It was a slow, agonizing realization. He looked from the sergeant to the prisoner, then down at the wallet on the counter. "Chief," Vance whispered. Miller came around the desk, moving faster than he had in years. "Vance, unlock those cuffs. Right now." "But he was... the driver said..." Vance stammered. "Unlock the damn cuffs." Miller roared, his voice echoing off the cinderblock walls. The entire booking room went silent. Every officer stopped what they were doing and looked up. Vance fumbled for his keys. His hands were shaking so badly he couldn't get the key into the slot. Miller shoved him aside, grabbed the key, and unlocked the cuffs himself. As the metal clicked open, Thorne rubbed his wrists. There were deep red indentations, the skin broken in one place. "I need a camera," Thorne said calmly. "I want these injuries documented immediately, and I want the watch commander down here." Miller nodded. "Right away, sir. Officer Vance, give me your weapon and your badge." "Sarge, come on, I didn't know." Vance pleaded, panic setting in. "You arrested a federal consultant who was here to audit us for bias," Miller hissed, keeping his voice low but lethal. "You arrested him for sitting on a bus. You ignored his ID. You just ended your career, son. Put the gun on the counter." At that moment, the double doors swung open and Captain Reynolds, the watch commander, strode in. He had been called by the desk sergeant the second Vance walked in. Reynolds was a sharp political animal who knew a PR disaster when he smelled one. He took in the scene, his officers staring Vance looking like a ghost, and Dr. Marcus Thorne, the man the mayor personally invited, standing there rubbing his bruised wrists. Reynolds walked straight to Thorne. "Dr. Thorne, on behalf of the department, I am incredibly sorry. This is... there are no words." Thorne looked at the captain. "There are words, Captain. Unlawful arrest are 2 of them. Civil rights violation are 3 more, and lawsuit is the one you should be worried about." Thorne turned his gaze to Vance, who was now standing stripped of his belt, looking small and young. "You assumed I was a criminal because of how I looked," Thorne said to him, his voice quiet but carrying across the room. "You didn't see a citizen. You didn't see a veteran. You saw a stereotype. And that blindness is exactly what I'm here to fix. But I can't fix you. You're done." The fallout was swift, brutal, and public. The video from the shuttle stop hit social media before Thorne had even left the precinct. The title was "Clickbait Gold Airport Cop Arrests Black Police Chief for Sitting." By noon, it had 2 million views. By 2:00 p.m., the mayor was holding a press conference. By 4 p.m., Officer Derek Vance was suspended without pay. The shuttle driver, Brett Collins, was fired by the transit company via a phone call he received while still bragging about the incident to a coworker. Dr. Thorne did not cancel his seminar. That afternoon at 2:00 p.m., he walked into the training auditorium. He was still wearing the same suit, now wrinkled. He had a bandage on his wrist. The room was packed with officers, the tension thick enough to choke on. Vance wasn't there, but his empty chair seemed to occupy the entire room. Thorne walked to the podium. He didn't use his slides. He simply projected the booking photo taken of him just 2 hours earlier onto the massive screen behind him. "This," Thorne said, pointing to his own mugshot, "is what happens when you stop thinking and start assuming." He spoke for 3 hours. He dissected his own arrest. He used Vance's police report, which had been leaked, as the primary text. He showed them exactly where the law ended and where bias began. It was the most effective training session the department had ever received, mostly because the living proof of their failure was standing right in front of them. But the lesson came with a price tag. Thorne sued. He didn't want to, but he knew that money was the only language the city understood. The lawsuit cited false imprisonment, assault, battery, defamation, and civil rights violations. The city didn't even try to fight it. The evidence was overwhelming. The body camera footage showed Vance mocking Thorne's credentials. The shuttle security cam showed Thorne sitting peacefully. The settlement was reached in record time, $6.4 million. It was one of the largest payouts in the city's history for a single arrest. Officer Derek Vance was terminated formally 3 weeks later. The review board found him guilty of 14 counts of policy violation. He was decertified, meaning he could never work as a police officer in the state again. He is currently working in warehouse logistics, paying off legal debts. Brett, the driver, is still unemployed, blacklisted from airport jobs. But as Dr. Thorne sat on his flight home, looking out the window at the clouds, he didn't feel a sense of triumph. He felt exhausted. He touched the bandage on his wrist. He thought about the millions of dollars, and he knew it wouldn't change the fact that for 20 minutes he wasn't a doctor, a chief, or an expert. He was just a body to be moved, a problem to be solved, a suspect in the eyes of a man with a badge. The system had worked eventually, but only because he was Marcus Thorne, only because he had the gold badge in his pocket, only because he knew the penal code better than the arresting officer. He thought about the young men who didn't have his resume, who didn't have the cameras watching, who sat on shuttles or park benches and were told they didn't belong. Who speaks for them when the camera isn't rolling? This story isn't just about a bad apple, it's about the tree that grows them. It's about the instinct to see difference as danger. Dr. Thorne's bank account is fuller, but his faith in the uniform he wore for 30 years is forever fractured, and that leaves us with a question we all need to answer. If a retired chief of police can't sit in a shuttle without being handcuffed, what chance does a regular citizen have? Is it time for mandatory malpractice insurance for police officers, so the taxpayers stop footing the bill for bias? I want to hear your thoughts. Do you think the settlement was enough? Or should the officer face criminal charges for false imprisonment? Leave a comment below. And if you believe these stories need to be told, please like and subscribe. We'll see you in the next video. Au revoir.